My favorite disc jockey and the one that inspired me. Well, I can answer that question right off the bat. I don't even have to think about that. Alan Freed, Moondog Alan Freed. Alan Freed was a disc jockey that came out of Cleveland, Ohio into New York City. And this is the man I wanted to be. He's the reason why I got into radio. I studied him like a book. When my mom wouldn't let me stay up late on a school night, I would turn on the radio next to my bed, turn to WINS at low volume, and listen until I fell asleep. Alan Freed was like the Frank Sinatra of disc jockeys. Everyone followed him. Alan didn't do a lot of production on his show. He didn't have to. He occasionally rang that cowbell, pound on that telephone directory, sing along a few bars of the record at the end, mention the name of the record and the label it's recorded on, read off some dedications, and back to the music. I still get chills up and down my spine when I listen to his old air checks today. As far as I'm concerned, there wasn't a disc jockey back then that could match him, and till this day, I haven't heard anyone that can match him now.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the After School Rock, Monday through Friday. The tops in rock.
Born under the name of Albert James Freed, later became known as Alan Freed, was born on December 15, 1921 in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, to a Welsh mother and a Lithuanian father. In 1933, Alan and his family moved to Salem, Ohio, where he attended Salem High School. Alan always enjoyed music, and at his high school, he played the trombone in a band called the Sultans of Swing. Alan Freed had a great interest in radio, and in 1942, he landed his first broadcasting position at WKST Radio in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. During the course of his career, he even became a sportscaster in Youngstown, Ohio.
My name is Alan Freed.
In 1944, Freed left WKST to work in Philadelphia for WIBE Radio. A year later, Freed's career took off like lightning when he became the people's favorite broadcaster in Akron, Ohio at WAKR Radio, where he played primarily jazz and pop music. But kids grew up, and they got tired of listening to the music their mothers and fathers were listening to. They wanted their own music identity. That's when Alan Freed set the stage. In 1949, Freed went to work in Cleveland, Ohio at WJW Radio. Soon after, he met a record store owner by the name of Leo Mintz. Leo owned Record Rendezvous and was aware of Alan's radio show and asked him if he would play this new music on the air. It's colored music, but the white kids seemed to like it. Alan and Leo convinced management of the radio station to get on board, and they did. Soon, Alan was nicknamed Moondog, and it became the Moondog Show.
Hello, everybody. How y'all tonight? This is Alan Freed, the old king of the Moondoggers, and it's time again for another of your favorite rock and roll sessions, blues and rhythm records for all the gang in the Moondog Kingdom. Saying hello to a lot of folks who've written to us tonight from all over the Moondog Kingdom. This is WJW, the Moondog Show.
From this point on, Alan Freed gained high popularity from the show. There was no email back in those days, but phone calls, cards, letters, telegrams, and the gang of fan mail poured in on Alan's desk every day.
Rock, 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 everybody. Roll, 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 everybody.
In March of 1952, Freed held the very first rock concert and dance, the Moondog Coronation Ball at the Cleveland Arena. Most of the people who listened to Freed were primarily African Americans. However, this concert helped to get more whites involved in R&B music. More than 2 times the capacity of the arena showed up, and when the crowd became unruly and pushed the gates down to get into the concert, it was chaos, and consequently, the show was canceled. But Allan didn't give up, because the following night, he went on the air just before the start of the show to make a public apology.
Hello, everybody. This is Alan Freed speaking. And, friends, I want to have a little talk with you before we begin our regular Moondog show tonight about the horrible disappointment of many thousands of folks who tried to attend our coronation ball at the Cleveland Arena last night. And believe me, I come to you very humbly and with deep regret in my heart because of the great disappointment that thousands of you who've been my friends suffered last night. And believe me, I want to say that I suffered right with you. If anyone, even in their wildest imagination, had told us that some 20 or 25,000 people would try to get into a dance, well, I suppose you would have been just like me. You probably would have laughed and said they were crazy. Now, this is entirely up to you. I know a great many of you are sitting on the fence ready to jump off on either side. And if you wish to lay the blame on me for what happened last night, you're certainly perfectly willing to do so. But the story I'm telling you tonight is the true story. Now, as everyone who was inside for the first hour of the dance will testify, we were having a real great time until the crushing pressure of some 10,000 people still outside smashed open the doors of the arena and converged on the inside. When that happened, and some 7,000 persons without tickets bulged the insides of the arena, the whole show went out of control. Now, friends, that's the story, and that's the truth. Now, I'd like to have you do this for me tonight when you call in your request to our Moondog show on this Saturday night. I would like to have you tell Dean on the telephone when you call in that you are with the Moondog. And if you're not with the Moondog, you can tell Dean that too. Because if enough of you can show faith tonight through your telephone calls, through your telegrams, through your cards and letters over the weekend to tell us that you're sticking with the Moondog through thick and thin, that it'll be worth your while because I will see that everything definitely is made all right again. And if enough of you show and tell us tonight on the telephone that you're going to continue to be loyal to the Moondog show, we will continue with the show. If not, the Moondog program will leave the radio. So please call when you call in your telephone request tonight. Tell us that you're with us because we are with you.
It worked, because during the course of the show that night, telephone calls and telegrams came in rampant in support of Alan Freed. Allan mentioned in that broadcast that he would personally fix the problem and make sure that every person who were ticket holders would get first preference to the best seats in the house at the next concert. At this time, Alan Freed had coined the phrase rock and roll from rhythm and blues in order to break down racial prejudices against R&B music. Not only did rock and roll break down racial barriers, it was a very important movement in music, especially for teenagers at that time. They idolized Alan Freed, and Alan Freed loved them just the same.
You know, it just goes to show you how much a lot of these wonderful kids do for other people all the time and have to take the brunt of all the attacks. And the most sickening thing I've seen in a long time is the marquee of one of our prominent movie theaters showing the picture called Blackboard Jungle, which is taken out of a paper magazine and transformed to the screen, called The Bold Story of the Teenage Terror. There are good and bad among all ages and all groups of people, but it's certainly a shame to single out the teenagers in this country and make everybody look at them just because they're teenagers. It happens to be a sin. They're the greatest and most wonderful age group in America. Since when has it become a crime to be a teenager?
In the early years of radio, disc jockeys from all over the country, both major and small markets alike, wanted to wind up in New York radio. The Alan Freed Show was so popular in Cleveland that while DJs all across the country called New York called Alan Freed.
Alan Freed here. The station is WINS, your contact station.
After 5 years in Cleveland, Alan Freed was hired at WINS in New York. He worked nights during the time when the so-called traditional good music stations dominated the airwaves. But Alan Freed ate up New York, and Moondog Mania began.
Hello, everybody. How are you all? This is yours truly, Alan Freed. Get your dancing shoes on, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Dance Party!
Freed took WINS from the bottom to the top in just a few short months. Rock and roll moved into the forefront of the music scene, the movie scene, and concerts. DJs were top dogs in radio, and as leader of the pack, Freed was high profile. He may have been bigger than Elvis at this point.
Rock, 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 everybody. Rock, 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 everybody. Rock, 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 everybody. You rock it and you rock it and you rock it around.
Alan Freed was a big advocate of black music, which made him a target for the so-called establishment. Parents, schools, churches, local government, and anyone else whose job it was to maintain the status quo. They were all outraged because they didn't like the music and the way the kids danced to it. They all thought it was the music of the devil, it was sinful, and they were all going to hell in a transistor radio. Still, the kids, both black and white alike, followed the lead of Alan Freed, and they continued to rock and roll.
This Alan Freed character, as far as I can see, he's the proverbial Pied Piper who's just sort of cashing in on a few illicit adolescent emotions.
If I'm guilty of anything, I'm guilty of being present at the birth of rock and roll. A music which is the honest, spontaneous expression of today's youth.
Freed held many dances, concerts, and radio programs in order to introduce rock and roll legends such as Jackie Wilson, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, and Bill Haley and the Comets. Freed sparked a series of stage shows, his own television program, and several rock and roll films such as Mr. Rock and Roll, Rock, 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 Don't Knock the Rock, and Go, Johnny, Go, which featured Jimmy Clanton, Chuck Berry, and Sandy Stewart. There were some movies in the past about the life of Alan Freed and the actors who portrayed him. Actors such as Tim McIntyre, Eric Bogosian, and Judd Nelson. But in my opinion, actor Gary Sinise would have made a better Alan Freed simply because of the similar facial features. Alan promoted his rock and roll shows at a few New York venues like the Brooklyn Fox, and down the street, his signature home, the Big Brooklyn Paramount. His concerts always seemed to make headlines as teenagers would line up in front of the theater 2 or 3 hours before showtime. The streets were crowded, traffic was heavy, the lights from the marquee were as bright as Times Square, and there was always a big police presence on horseback. The line would stretch clear around the block, and in some cases, some couldn't get in until the next show. Sometimes there were as much as 6 shows a night. The kids always had a rock and roll time, and there was always something to talk about the next day.
And now, here's one of your favorite vocal groups, the Moonglows, the Sincerely Kids singing Over and Over Again.
One of his memorable controversial concerts moved into the Boston arena, and trouble followed. Freed was warned by the Archdiocese as well as the Boston Police Department to keep the show out of Boston.
She's got it. Oh, baby, she's got it. Oh, baby, she's got it. I can't do without her. Ah!
When the show began, there was so much energy in the air. Alan Freed came out on stage, held up his arms and said, "We're gonna rock and roll tonight." The audience jumped out of their seats. The minute that happened, the house lights went on and the police entered. Several times during the show, the stage was mobbed and Alan came out to ask everyone to stay in their seats. But the police refused to yield to Alan's request to turn out the house lights. Freed at that point made a remark to the audience. "Well, kids, it looks like the Boston police don't want you to have any fun." When the show completed and people walked out of the arena, there was a stabbing and other disturbances on the outside. The Boston police took everything that happened in the area that night and attributed it to Alan Freed and rock and roll. The city of Boston indicted Alan Freed for inciting a riot just because of his remark to the audience. Freed was brought up on charges and had to appear in court. Freed would have been facing jail time had he been convicted. When Freed returned home, he was fired by WINS Radio. Management felt he was too controversial, and the anti-rock and roll force's focus on him was hurting the station. But Freed and his supporters felt the music itself was a phony issue. They believed that Freed's only crime was supporting black music and introducing it to a white middle-class audience.
Before we leave tonight, we'd like to say special thanks to our friends in the music business and to our wonderful friends here and all of you out there for your great loyalty. This is not goodbye, it's just good night, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
After that final tearful broadcast, Allan put another record on the turntable and walked out the door, greeted by hundreds of supporting teenagers outside the studio with tears in their eyes, saying, "What are we going to do without you?" It didn't take long before Alan Freed got back on his feet. At this point, he was hired at WABC Radio. But it wasn't the same. It was a different format than what he was used to, and his voice delivery was a little more subdued.
Boy, did that record take off like a skyrocket. Request from Newark, New Jersey for that to Stella, Tony, Angie, and all the cats who sport around in Renee's 1960 Impala. Ginny, thank you for a wonderful letter. Ginny says she's 19 now, but she's...
I'd like to thank you, Mr. DJ, for spinning the record I asked you to play.
Later that year, a grand jury indicted 5 New York disc jockeys, including Alan Freed, on charges that they have accepted payola. Alan Freed was then fired from WABC, and if that weren't enough, allegedly Alan's house was seized for filing improper income tax because of the allegations that were reported.
We didn't know just who was wrong, so I sent my request to you.
In 1960, Alan Freed moved his family to Los Angeles, where he was hired at KDAY Radio. Ironically, K-Day, as they referred it to at that time, was owned by the same company that owned WINS.
Hi again, everybody. Alan Freed on K-Day at the top of the dial until 7 o'clock. We got some great new ones today for you. And your old favorites, and all the current hits, and a lot of dedications from guys and gals who've written in. So get your dancing shoes on and welcome. We're going to have a ball.
Freed stayed at KDAY for only 13 months. The story was told that management refused to let him promote live rock and roll shows. The station was sold, and Alan Freed then returned to New York, where he then emceed a live twist review. When the twist craze cooled down, Alan Freed moved to Miami, Florida, where he worked as a disc jockey at WQAM. Freed realized at this point that his dream of returning to New York radio was just that. Freed's Miami job lasted only 3 months. This would be his last shot in radio. February 20th, 1965, the one-time king of rock and roll, top radio disc jockey, television host, music, concert, and movie promoter, died at his home at the age of 43.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. DJ, for spinning the record I asked you to play.
Alan Freed died young and penniless. His career was short, but he created an impact that put him ahead of his time. He didn't go along with the status quo, and he paid a big price. He stood his ground, he believed in rock and roll, and he was an advocate for teenagers. His promotion for black music was taboo in those days, but Alan Freed wasn't the only white disc jockey to play black music. As quiet as it's kept, it was also done in the South. The only difference was, Alan Freed was far, far in the forefront. Today, black recording artists are able to cross over. However, every one of them can all thank Alan Freed for the job.
My nights don't seem so endless. My days don't seem so bare. I'm walking on a cloud. feel just like a live wire. I've been
Freed was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. His son Lance Freed attended the dinner that night and accepted the award on his father's behalf. Also inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame in 1988. And in 1991, a comprehensive biography, Big Beat Heat, Alan Freed and the Early Years of Rock and Roll was published. That same year, Freed received a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame.
I cried a tear because of you.
It's been years since Alan Freed has left us. Some say he was a forgotten man. Others say they vividly remember him. Some vaguely, some not at all. But for those of us who knew him and loved him, know that when he left us, he left a big space in our hearts that cannot be filled and reserved only for him. Now that he's gone, some of the old venues he played have crumbled. The Brooklyn Fox Theater has since been torn down with a more modern look. The New York Paramount is dust flowing in Times Square. As far as the Brooklyn Paramount, well, the original building still stands today. Only now, it's part of a college campus. The students who walk through the hallways of that building probably have no idea who Alan Freed was or what rock and roll was all about unless told by their parents or grandparents. But I could imagine the echoes of years past are sounding through the corridors, and the kids are saying, "What kind of music is that playing? And where is it coming from? And whose voice is that speaking?" Well, if the echoes of the Brooklyn Paramount of years gone by really exist, then I'm betting it's the music of rock and roll. And the voice is the man, Alan Freed.
Have you come true? Don't make me cry. A tear for you.